name's Jenny Smith, for those of you that don't know me. I'm the Group Financial Controller here at New Zealand Post, and I'm going to be your MC for the next hour. So welcome to our panel discussion for International Women's Day. This year we've decided to do something a little bit different, and we've invited men in to join the conversation. So in line with the 2019 theme for International Women's Day of Balance for Better, we've brought together a gender balance panel from across the business to share their insights on what balance means for them and what we could be doing better here in New Zealand and here at New Zealand Post. But first, since we do have a mixed audience, a little bit of background on International Women's Day. It was first observed over 100 years ago, and it's a global day celebrating the social, economic, cultural and political achievements of women. The day is also used as a call to action to accelerate gender parity. International Women's Day was first honoured in Austria, Denmark, Germany and surprisingly Switzerland in March 1911. More than 1 million women and men attended rallies campaigning for women's rights to work, to be trained, to vote, to hold public office and to end discrimination. Then in 1975 it was celebrated for the first time by the United Nations, and since 1996 the UN has adopted an annual theme. So some of you might think that all the battles have been won for women, but the unfortunate fact is that women are still, on average, paid less than their male counterparts. Women are still not present in equal numbers in business or in politics, and women's education, health and risk of violence against them is still worse than that of men. However, great improvements have been made, certainly since 1911. We do have female astronauts and prime ministers. Schoolgirls are welcomed into university. Women can work and have a family. Women have real choices. And so on the 8th of March each year, the world acknowledges women and celebrates their achievements. And yes, for those of you in the room wondering, there is an International Women's Day. It's on the 19th of November. And so to this year's theme, Balance for Better. From grassroots activism to worldwide action, we are entering an exciting period in history where the world expects balance. We notice its absence and we celebrate its presence. Balance drives a better working world. So let's all help create a balance for better. Balance is not a women's issue, it's a business issue. There are numerous studies that show diversity and inclusion have real bottom line benefits. Whilst gender is only one component of diversity and inclusion, the race is on for a gender-balanced boardroom, government, media coverage, a gender balance of employees, more gender balance in wealth, on screen, and in sports coverage. Gender balance is essential for economies and communities to thrive. So how are we doing here in New Zealand? New Zealand has the second highest rate of female participation in the workforce in the OECD. It's estimated that by 2025, 3 times as many women than men will graduate from New Zealand tertiary education, which suggests the education system is already not producing a balanced outcome. Women are already almost as likely as men to work in managerial roles. However, these tend to be concentrated in female-dominated industries such as health and education, and women continue to be considerably underrepresented amongst senior management positions, particularly in corporates. The latest figures from NZX show the percentage of women directors on listed company boards is just 22%, and 27 New Zealand listed companies have no women on their boards. This puts us behind the United States, Australia, India, the UK. And so how about here at New Zealand Post? Starting at the top, our current board has a 75-25 female to male split, but that's due to a couple of vacancies at the moment. So that will change once the vacancies are filled, but in recent years we've had either a 4-4 or a 5-3 split, so it's always been pretty balanced at that board level. However, at the senior leadership team, there's been 7 to 9 members over the last few years, and we've generally just had 2 women at that table. Across the business, 54% of our workforce are female, which increases to 57% across the operational side of the business. 64% of the people, 64% of the people leaders in the operational side of the business are women, but this drops to just 39% in the corporate roles. Consistent with the experience across New Zealand, there is a significant drop-off at the senior leadership level, with just 34% of senior leadership roles currently filled by women. But if you look at our panel over here, you'll see that we've got balance absolutely nailed today. So we're hoping for some really good conversation and debate from our panelists, and for you, for our audience, to leave with some insights and inspiration as we look to balance for better. And so, to our panel, can you please all introduce yourselves, tell us who you are, what you do, and why you wanted to be part of this conversation today? Briefly, thank you.
Starting with me. Okay. Kia ora, ko Malcolm Shoraho. I lead our people and governance area at New Zealand Post. Been leading the people side since late last year. The governance side, and what I mean by that is a bunch of corporate services, strategy functions ranging from our sustainability comms team through to legal, secretariat, regulatory and property. Been leading a mixture of those areas for over 18 years now. In terms of why I wanted to be here today, look, I think this is a really important conversation. I'm absolutely passionate about this organisation being truly purpose-led, an organisation in which everyone can, bring their whole selves to work, express themselves. I think the only way to do that is by having a diverse workforce and one in which we hear a range of views.
Hi, I'm Gwion Thornley. I'm the Acting Regional Operations Leader for Northern. I've been with Post for 19 years, predominantly in the mail delivery side, but over the last about 2.5 years I've been getting much more heavily involved in the fleet and courier side of the business. I think one of the reasons why I wanted to come along today, first of all, I was an honour to be invited, but when I look back on my 19 years in Post, two of my most influential leaders were both women, Rowena O'Neill and Susan Cameron, who I think still works here. So, and they were a massive influence on me coming up through Post. I think in the male side, the diversity, basically men were the minority in the frontline leadership team. But as I've come further up through Post, that balance seems to be shifting a bit, which is not necessarily where we want to be. So that's why I want to be here today.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Jenny kora tōku ingoa. I'm currently the Area Service Delivery Manager based in Rotorua. I've been with Post in several operational roles for around 23 years, not that I'm counting. But obviously the 23 years and I'm still here is a reflection of the great place Post is. So part of being here also today is, I think, if we're going to stretch ourselves and encourage other females in the business, sometimes you just need to be the voice and put yourself out there. So that's me.
Kia ora, I'm Miranda. So I started about a month ago at New Zealand Post. So pretty fresh. And I'm the new community investment specialist. So basically working with Dawn and a range of other people in the organisation on our community programs and our portfolio. So that's really fun. But the other thing that I do is that I am also a co-founder of a social enterprise called Dignity, and that basically supports women in the workplace and girls in school. So yeah, it's really important for me personally. I really, really care about gender diversity and women and celebrating that. So I really want to be part of it. Yeah.
Cool.
Thanks, Miranda. So we've got just going to run through a few questions with the panel and give them an opportunity to share some of their insights from quite a few years of experience over there. So getting the balance right, what does that mean for you, Malcolm?
Oh, well, it means that we look for people in different ways, that we're prepared to take risk around making appointments, that we have people from, I mean, it is both gender diversity and other types of diversity, but I actually believe that if we tackle the gender diversity question, actually that will have a big influence on other areas of diversity. In terms of I think worth talking about what it means for me personally. I talked a little bit about that on the intro, but in the end it's about creating a working environment that is a great working environment for everyone. And I've I've got 2 daughters, I've got a son, and I really care about this for the world that they're going to work in. And it's not just about the daughters. Yeah, it absolutely is. And I want them to have all the opportunities that I've had. But equally, I want my son to operate in a world which is different and a fairer world, and a world that, as I said before, allows you to totally be yourself, and that will bring the best out of everyone for the benefit of New Zealand and the world and our businesses, and actually, as you said, Jen, at the beginning, ultimately deliver a better bottom line, so that will make some of the accountants in the audience happy.
Thanks, Malcolm. And Gwion, same to you. What does getting the balance right mean for you?
I think being an operational guy, it's kind of hard to get away from the practicalities of it. I think diversity beyond gender brings different perspectives to the table, which I think is ultimately going to give you a better outcome as far as your decision making goes. I will say that while I've worked with and I have a lot of fantastic women leaders working for me, I have never made a hiring decision based on gender as far as trying to get the balance right. And I think sometimes you can fall into a trap where you start to think about getting that balance right and bringing in, you fall into a trap of what different gender preconceptions around what a different gender or a woman can bring into your business, and they can be gender based, your own prejudices. So I think it's complicated. Yeah.
Oh, it's certainly not straightforward.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'd have to reiterate what my brother here said regarding working in the operations space. Generally, throughout the years, we've had a high presence of female leadership. A lot to do with that is that the roles that we offer across our business and operations suit lifestyle and family needs. And we've ended up with what might appear a little bit of unbalance in that spectrum. But like Gwion too, we've always recruited for the best person for the job, and that's what provides balance for us in that space and operations.
Yeah, if I can just add to that. So recruiting for the best person for the job is absolutely right, but I do think we need to force ourselves to, and that's about being aware of our biases, force ourselves to think differently when we're thinking about recruiting people for roles, and being aware of, potentially men are, and you've got to be really careful with this stuff because it's stereotype stuff, but potentially men are better at, talking themselves up and selling the experiences they have and how that enables them to potentially take on a bigger role. And so encouraging women to do the same, and creating an environment and a space for women to do the same, and as I say, be able to be prepared to take risk around experience levels and capabilities.
Yeah, I think there's that statistic, and I can't exactly remember what it was, but it was something like men apply for jobs that they feel 60% qualified for, but women, if they're 90% qualified, they focus on that 10%, and so they don't go for it. And so I think that is a big hurdle in terms of making women realise their value, and that I think definitely you're right, looking in those other places doesn't mean that the person that you hire is going to be less qualified or capable.
Yeah.
So it's about getting that balance right too.
Yeah.
And so Miranda, you're obviously quite new to the business.
Yeah.
I don't know if you had any sort of first reflections on balance here at New Zealand Post, or anything that you've seen other organisations do.
Yeah, no, I think
That we could try.
I mean, it's so impressive here. It's really, I've worked in small businesses before this, and prior to this, my main employers were just men, and that was totally fine. But it's so nice to have a myriad of women who are older than me, and doing such cool stuff, and doing such amazing things in this really big business, and that's really nice for me personally as a young woman developing my career. And I think in terms of what I do with Dignity, so we provide sanitary items, we put them in bathrooms and workplaces, and so a lot of the people we work with are like STEM-based companies because they have such an issue with retaining women and having women. And so I think they would be quite jealous of what New Zealand Post has, but obviously there's always room for improvement. Yeah, but I definitely feel like there's always two parts to developing good gender diversity, and one of them is the systemic stuff, so having women in leadership and having things like flexible hours, and then there's developing a culture that supports it and feeling like women can have a discussion, and that's definitely here. So that's very cool. Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked a little bit about that it's not just about gender. So how do we go about getting the balance right in terms of gender, but also thinking age, culture, background, ethnicity, sexuality? Jen?
Well, I think today's opportunity confirms that we're in the right space thinking-wise and that we're having the conversation. So we're probably well ahead of the game there. In regards to age, well, Miranda... and looking around the room today, you know, we've got some young guns coming up in the bizzo, so that's fantastic to see, and also a female in that regard. Background, ethnicity, culture. Again, if you look across the room, we have many representations in here, but if you go out into the bigger network, we are very diverse in ethnicity, culture. And the fantastic thing is the business is becoming more accommodating in regard to some of those ethnicities, etc. Last year we had the campaign for Te Reo Te Wiki, which was fabulous to see from a Māori perspective, and how much we've grown in that space at Post.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, I can't remember the stats, but our demographics, in a broad sense, largely represent the demographics of New Zealand and the multiculturalism and diversity that we have. Where it breaks down, though, is at a leadership level, and that's where it doesn't necessarily flow through. And that's the opportunity, as it is with gender diversity as well.
So how will that benefit our business?
Look, in a range of ways. So there's a ton of evidence to say that you get greater creativity, innovation, resilience, that if you've got women around the table, that women are better at reading non-verbal cues, about taking turns in conversations, and so you just you get better outcomes. Representing our customers, reflecting back our customers. I think that is increasingly an issue. Customers want to buy goods and services from people who look like them. So if we're all just white males, then are you going to have the same level of trust of the organisation? So I think, and as I said, ultimately there is a ton of evidence that it will benefit the bottom line, and it will make us a better place to work. More enjoyable place to come to work.
So balance, I think also it links into engagement. So if we've got the balance right, we've got an engaged workforce, the benefits overall to our business are fantastic, and we see small spots around the country, and we need to grow that a bit more to get that overall benefit.
And actually, just adding to what I said before, that one of the other really important things, we're in an environment of, I think there's 4% unemployment in New Zealand, so that basically means, it's really hard to find people for jobs, and so, it creates a broader talent pool.
Cool. So what do you think needs to change to make some traditionally more male or female roles more attractive to both genders? For example, you'd see in the HR team we've got a predominantly female workforce, whereas technology and operations get different mixes in different parts of the business. So I don't know, Guion, do you have any?
Yeah, so I mean, I have a I have a lady who leads a team of couriers who are predominantly all men, and a lot of them come from a culture which has some quite traditional values, I suppose it's probably fair to say, around gender roles. So she's had to be very courageous, and I think one of the things that I see, that one of the challenges that women face entering the workforce is if a man is quite forthright as a leader, he's considered to be hard, whereas if a woman is quite forthright, she's often just considered to be bossy and a bit of a pain in the ass sometimes.
You take that back.
And I think, it does take a lot of courage and confidence. And I think to Malcolm's point in those stats around, applying for roles, I think, doing what we're doing today, celebrating National Women's Day and just empowering women and giving them confidence, I think is the key to get them into those roles. And I've actually had women leaders often say to me, I'd rather lead men, sometimes. So, I think it's about getting the right person for the role. Yeah.
And Malcolm, you've recently taken on the people role, and obviously that team is quite female dominated, and that's quite traditional. It's quite common in other businesses. Is there something we should be doing, could be doing, to make those roles more attractive to men, to get more of a balance around that table?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm quite used to having women around me in the other part of my teams as well, and actually it works really well. But to the point that balance works really well. But again, it might be about how we look for people and sell the roles, and just thinking differently around that. In terms of bringing more women into some of the roles that we don't traditionally as much, and particularly in leadership roles, we have to think differently about it. And I've got an example in one of my teams in a leadership role where the automatic default would have been to have that role as a full-time role, and only people who are prepared to work full-time could go into it. And actually, if you want to get the best person for the role, sometimes you have to think more flexibly around it. So flexible working part-time, although so-called part-time, that's always the balance, is to actually get that right for the person who is in the role.
Yeah, that's true to your point about getting the right balance, even at an operational level. In Rotorua, we have 2 DAs who share a full-time role, and it came about 2 great people, want to keep their value to the team and to the business overall. Let's take the risk, and 9 months down the track, we're working well. So it was to accommodate a mum with childcare needs, and the other one was someone who was heading into retirement, so lessen the workload a tad, but both top individuals, and it's working well for us and for the business as well.
Great. Thanks, Jen. So how do we go about teaching our young people about balance and getting the right balance? We'll pick on
Miranda.
I think it's as complex as kind of gender issues are, and I think it's kind of double-sided. It's about developing a culture that supports women to put themselves out there. So making sure that there are the systems in place that support women, flexible hours, things like that. And then I think there is also great ways to empower young women to push themselves further. So, what was I going to say? Yeah, I think the culture behind Lean In, although there are some issues with it, women are really, really capable, and when put in those situations often can excel. And so I think, again, it's getting that balance right behind the culture, and then behind pushing women individually. So I think that's really important in terms of getting the balance. But I also think heaps of work has been done to get us to where we are today, and it's on building on top of that. And then I also think it's about, for men too, in terms of more feminine roles, creating a culture that also supports them too. So I was actually listening to a podcast this morning about how male nurses in particular are often dismissed, and it's often like a butt of jokes and soap operas and things like that, or comedies, that there's a man who's a nurse because it's a woman's job, and that's degrading to men and to women. Like, it's just so unnecessary, and it's just taking that rhetoric out and creating a space where everyone can do whatever they want and it's supported.
Yeah, I think the same thing, Miranda, about being primarily the woman who providing the childcare, and it's the man who's got to go out there and chase the dollars. And you see that same rhetoric coming through in shows on TV, and all of that needs to change for the benefit of all of us.
Yeah, no, and I think like my sister had a baby recently, and she took half the parental leave, and then her partner took the other half of parental leave, and that was really cool that they had the opportunity to do that. So processes like that, assist in the development of changing what is normal for certain genders and what is not.
Yeah, and then that, creates different expectations in the children growing up in that environment, and changes the system, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And how about you, Gwion? So you were talking earlier about managing your family life as well as your working life.
Yeah, I think it's getting the around childcare, and work-life balance. I think getting that balance right is, for women, I think, is a challenge. I mean, I think for myself, I was, pretty much used to do 50-50 as far as the childcare duties, and I think as I've moved up through the business lifestyle, as the roles have become more challenging, I think getting that work-life balance has become a bit more of a challenge for us. And my partner's she's a secondary school teacher, and she also has a lot of managerial roles within the school as well. And she works weekends and has a very demanding job. And she does, I'm honest, she does more of the childcare duties than I do now, which is not right. It's just sort of happened organically, and I don't really feel 100% comfortable with it. But that's just the way it is. So, that's the way it's unfolded. I also think around young people, and when we talked before about traditional roles, I think a lot of traditionally male roles have been physical roles, but I think those roles that require a lot of physicality, or roles like truck driving in the fleet industry, have often been very male dominated. But I think there's lots of improvement, especially I think women's sport, and we're seeing more and more promotion of that. I've had a lot of women working for me who play quite high level league and women's rugby, and I think that's breaking that barrier down a lot. That women are physically capable to be firewomen, to be policewomen, to run around in a courier van unloading 30 kilo boxes for 12 hours a day. They can do all that stuff. So I think there's some positive stuff happening.
And getting the right balance also, while there is no doubt experience in the teaching part for our young people, we also have to give them the opportunity to contribute with ideas. The world's changing, and what our customers require of us as well. Some of our young people would be more in touch than, say, Gwion and I would be with, the space changing out there. So it's a definite balance in that way also, that it's inclusive, our approach to moving forward.
Great. Thanks, Jen. So we're just going to let the rest of the panel have a wee break now, just while we hear from Miranda, who's going to just talk a little bit more about her involvement in Dignity.
As I briefly touched on before, I am a co-founder of a social enterprise called Dignity, which is actually at New Zealand Post, which is very cool. And basically the way it works is that it is a buy one, give one model. So we give sanitary items, so pads, tampons and moon cups to some organisations, to the female employees, and then using a buy one, give one model to give to girls in school who don't have access. So I'll just give you a brief rundown of what it is, and then my perspective of being a young female leader and how that's been for me. So basically about 2.5 years ago, I was flatting with my friend Jacinta, and we'd just been accepted into this business boot camp type thing. We were given a small stipend to create a business over the summer. And at that time, there was a lot of media about girls missing out on school because they couldn't afford sanitary items. And this really hit home because it was something I hadn't even thought about before. I've been very privileged in that I've never had to truly, be in this situation, and it just seemed ridiculous. And then there was also a lot of discussions at the time about the cost of sanitary items over a woman's life, and it equates to something like $15,000. So it's a huge portion of money, especially for those in lower socioeconomic groups. What was it, sorry? Yeah, and it's taxed at a luxury price. So it's this bizarre situation, and it wasn't really talked about until about 2.5 years ago. And at the same time, we were seeing again that there was this discussion about gender diversity in the workplaces, and there was this need for tangible gender diversity initiatives. So kind of as I was discussing about before, it's exported a bit funny, but when there are diversity goals, there are kind of two parts to it. So there's having the systemic change, so women in leadership and flexible hours and parental leave and things like that to support women, and then also the cultural aspect and the more tangible aspects. So some organisations do things like unconscious bias training, which is good in some ways and bad in some ways, and blind shortlisting, which again is good in some ways and bad in some ways. And we wanted to provide something that would, again, add value to that in a really tangible way to shift and normalise the culture to say to women that, hey, we know what's going on, like we know you get periods and we know that does affect you, and as an organisation we're proud to be able to support you with it. And it was also affecting women, particularly in roles who couldn't leave where they were working, so in places like call centres, operation centres where it was really difficult to leave. There was also this need for women who were being caught short and having to hide their products, and yeah, it was very bizarre. So that's kind of why we developed what we developed. And since then, it's grown quite a bit. So I think we've got about 10 customers, and we've given away a total of 12,000 boxes of product, which equates to about 160,000 individual items. And one of the key things about our business is that we really wanted it to be environmentally friendly. So the products are biodegradable. So they biodegrade in 5 years instead of 500, which is a huge amount of waste reduction that we've been able to support. And we're now also supporting about 50 New Zealand high schools. And we've been receiving basically this research as well. So whenever we give to a high school, we find out how that's impacted them, and we find out that girls are now attending school more. And more than that is that these people, like nurses and other intermediaries who had been supporting the children who hadn't had access to products by giving money to support them themselves, didn't have to do that anymore. So that's been really fantastic for us to know that this is a problem that's been happening, but we're helping to resolve it. So with that in mind, in my experience kind of developing a business at such a young age, I've learned quite a few things. One of the key things is that I feel like anybody can be a leader. Although there are, obviously I'm privileged in lots of ways to be able to be where I am today, I definitely don't feel like I'm any more special than anyone else in terms of being able to set this up. I just had an idea. I was lucky that I was in the boot camp to be able to have a small stipend and support. And because I kept on going with it, I got to where I am today. And so that's been really important for me to realise that these people in leadership positions aren't special and they aren't different, and that actually any person is capable of that. And so that was something I really wanted to say today, is that everyone is capable. But it hasn't been without its challenges. So imposter syndrome is definitely a thing that I think a lot of young women face. It's definitely challenging to put yourself out there and say that you're a credible professional businesswoman when that's not necessarily what you see out in the world all the time, is young women doing these things, but it is growing so much, and so that's been really fantastic. But the other thing that we've had to deal with is credibility. So while we're pushing to be taken seriously, there's also been things happening like we've been called girl boss, and that, while that is coming from a nice place, peers who are male my age don't get called boy bosses, and that's something that just shows that even though we have made heaps of development, we're not there, because I'm not actually a child. Like, I'm in my 20s, I started a business that's grown, and to kind of be called a girl boss is a little bit patronising. So there are challenges still there, but it is changing and working towards it. And just in terms of where we're going, so there's going to be a growth for Dignity this year. My co-founder is going full-time next month, and we're expanding to other beneficiaries, so family planning clinics, teen parent colleges, the Pacific Islands, and we're also collaborating for longer-term solutions to peri-poverty, because ours is really only an immediate solution and it's not a systemic change. And so that's me. Thank you.
Thanks, Miranda. So we asked, with the invite that went out, we did ask for any burning questions that people had that they wanted to ask. So we've got a few more questions for the panel. So the first one, no small subject. Do we know what the gender pay gap is here at New Zealand Post, and what are we doing about it?
Would like me to answer that? Okay. Okay, so let's put it on the table. We do have a gender pay gap, and we do know what it is, and you can measure it in two different ways. I'm not going to explain. I'll tell you what the numbers are and what the two different ways are. Don't ask me to explain them, because that's why I studied law and didn't do maths or accounting and stuff, because that's just not my thing. But so our median pay gap's 1%. There are people in the audience who can correct me if I've got this wrong. And our average pay gap's 14%. And so, you then say, well, does that mean that that every woman is getting paid less than they should be, and therefore every woman in the workforce should be paid more, and New Zealand Post should be paid more? And no, it doesn't mean that, because there are a whole range of drivers for it. I mean, for example, as I think we've sort of referred to it during the discussion, we have way more men in senior roles than women, and therefore that automatically means that on average men get paid more. Therefore, at a raw level, we've got a gender pay gap. We need to then get under the hood and say, okay, what does it actually mean in like-for-like jobs and like-for-like gradings? And we've done a whole bunch of analysis around that. And yeah, in some areas, in some areas we have positive gender pay gaps. In other areas, we have negative gender pay gaps, and that's when we start to think, okay, what are we going to do about it? And there are a range of things from first understanding that data, making sure that, and this is something that we started doing last year, that when it comes to remuneration review, that if women, in particular, because they tends to be more women than men, away on parental leave, that they don't miss out on the remuneration review, which just puts them further behind, and it escalates over time. When it comes to remuneration reviews, actually being quite transparent about the average increases given to men over women, so it forces the dialogue and the discussion to ask, is there a good reason for it? Because if you've got say a job where you've got two people and one's a man and one's a woman, there might be a really good reason for paying the man more than the woman, or vice versa, depending on experience and where they are along the curve and what they bring to it. So it's complex, and there's a whole lot to it. What I can assure you is that it's very top of mind, that our board and our HR committee are asking lots of really good questions about it. They're asking for data around, as we bring new people into the business, what does that tell us? Are we exacerbating the gender pay gap as we appoint people internally into new roles? Are there differences occurring, particularly where you've got like roles? And I think given that transparency and visibility will create change over time. So there's a long-winded answer. Hopefully that helps. And really happy to talk to anyone about it.
Thanks, Malcolm.
I think to add to Malcolm's point that in regard to remuneration, it can be a courageous conversation.
Yeah.
And you really got to, believe in yourself, back yourself and sell yourself. And I'd encourage you, we have a guideline. If you can, push it. And if Malcolm comes back and says, hey, I'm happy to
half my
accept
team
it.
are in here.
I'd be happy to accept it based on some good factual stuff.
Yeah.
But I'd encourage, every female, every employee to get out there and sell yourself, value yourself, and recognise what you bring to this business that makes it so awesome.
Yeah, I mean, just to add to that, Jen, I think it's a great point. I think there's a bunch of evidence that, and anecdotal and reflected through the stats, that men are generally better and about backing themselves and pushing themselves, particularly when they first come into an organisation. As we know, where you start actually does make a difference. So, if you get behind the 8 ball from the start, it can be quite challenging for a whole range of reasons to make up the ground.
I'd like to add to that. I mean, it's the first time I've heard the term imposter syndrome, but I think men have a greater propensity to take risk.
Yeah.
And we take a lot of stupid risks. And it's probably reflected by our mortality rate. So don't do the stupid things, do the good things that we do, and learn from our mistakes.
Yeah, Miranda and I were having a conversation recently where Miranda sort of made the same point, and I said to her, actually it's not a woman-only thing, but it might be, again, huge generalisations, it might be what men do with it, because I can assure you I've had plenty of imposter syndrome along the way too. Which I think you found refreshing, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So, which goes to the point about being able to be open and talk about these things.
Yeah. I think because women, is it also that women don't like to talk about money as much as a whole? Like I remember, was Kate Winslet or something asked about how much she got paid in a movie, and she said it was rude to talk about. And it's like, it is rude.
Just because she's English.
Okay, then that's all right.
Okay, for those who didn't hear, that was because she's English, apparently. So another stereotype. Yeah.
But yeah, if it's hard. It's like if it's rude to talk about, and we're told like don't talk about it. But then it's like, but you need to stand up for yourself, and it's like, well, I don't know what's going on, and makes it harder.
Is it the risk that you would? Is it the risk of if you don't get the money you're asked for, you're willing to just walk away?
I don't know.
Yeah.
If you need a support person, mate, I'm it. No.
Okay, thanks. And the next question is another slightly controversial subject, I suppose, and it's about quotas. So a number of businesses, both in New Zealand and elsewhere, have come out and said that they've got targets of 40-40-20 split at senior levels, meaning 40% women, 40% men, and 20% of either. But do you think there's a place for formal quotas, or does that not drive the right behaviour to get the right outcomes?
Oh, look, I think there's some truism in what gets measured gets done, and look, we have and do have some improvement targets. But, if you're going to have them, you've got to actually have some stuff behind them. There's no point in having that unless you do some things differently. So, look, I think it's a live conversation. I think it's one that's worth continuing to have.
I think I think in some situations it's necessary, but I think it's a blunt instrument. But I think in examples of political representation, I think quotas have worked really well and have been necessary. I'd like to think that they're not necessary in New Zealand Post, but maybe I'm being overly positive about our, because there's some stats, that aren't that good about it. So, yeah.
I mean, just to your point, Jenny, when you're talking about our board and the number of women on our board, on SOE boards generally, having targets and quotas or targets anyway, that has driven a change on SOE boards. And by the way, actually, we currently have 5 out of 6 directors woman now. So the two new directors just appointed. So actually, we don't quite have a balanced right anymore.
Yeah.
But there you are.
Yeah, too far the other way.
Quotas, right? If we had a 40-40-20 quota, we couldn't hit that. So.
Yeah, that's true.
If we look internally as well for someone coming from the provinces where geographically those senior leadership roles are based, I love living in Rotorua. I love getting to work in 8 minutes. Lifestyle is everything. The balance is there. So for someone in my position, thinking ahead, if I was to seek a role, it would definitely mean for me thinking about relocation into one of those areas, possibly, unless we're going to get really diverse, Mel. That, we could do some things out in the regions and then, come to a main hub city centre like Auckland or Wellington, for example. Definitely something to keep in mind for the future.
Yeah, I mean, look, that does come back to doing things differently, and as technology improves, I hope it's working well today. We know the VCs don't always, there are potential ways of doing things, and we have male leaders who live in different places, so I wouldn't discount it, Jen. So you. Yeah.
Great. I think we've probably just got time for one last question for the panel, and it segues quite nicely from what we were talking. And so it's about work-life balance and lifestyle, and what we can do to make it easy for people to manage work and their commitments, whether that is looking after a family or sports commitments or other community involvement.
Crikey, I'm hoping somebody can tell me.
Well, I guess one of the things I learned earlier on in my leadership days was, being a female, you want to be on a par with everything else, if not better. So it meant, on a daily basis, long hours. And then on reflection, I noticed that there were a few other people in the building too, at the same time. And reflecting, I wasn't creating a good example. So to get it, I think you have to set the example, know when to switch off, know when to have, fun with your peeps. But the example comes back to us as leaders to set it for our people.
I mean, I'd like to think, in my team, I always promote a family first culture. If something's happening with someone with their family, then it's never a question to give them the opportunity to go and do that. And I just think we need to keep building that. I think I can't really talk to the challenge of, I guess, being a mother and having a full-time job. I haven't experienced that myself. I've witnessed some of the challenges. I think it's difficult. I think we've still got a long way to go to solve that. I think remote working, I know women who can work remotely or work from home, and I think technology is a real help. And I know for me it gives me balance. Like I'll be watching my kid in his karate class, and I've got some time to see what happened on Yammer. But it's a blessing, but it's also a curse because, like Jen said, where do you switch off?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think there's. Again, I just heard this on a podcast, but I heard, it was talking about women in emotional labour and how emotional labour is kind of this kind of social work that we do with others, and often women put a lot more effort into that, and that's a lot more exhausting, and that can have further on repercussions. And I guess that links again into women's work often not being monetarily valued, and therefore having to work harder on the other spectrum of it and putting in lots more work, and often that can mean that being a parent is more fulfilling when you're a father than when you're a mother, that's a big claim to make. It was more saying that women are often more stressed when they're mothers than fathers are stressed, not that people get more value out of being a father than a mother.
That's probably fair.
Yeah, sorry, that came across wrong. So again, there's lots of it's all this cultural stuff that's huge, really big that we have to work through. But it's making sure that at an organisational level there are things in place to try and change and move forward, as you're saying, and do things differently. Yeah.
I know from my own personal experience. So I have a small child at home, and technology has been an amazing enabler. So it means that I can just spend 40 hours in the office. If I need to do extra time, I can do it in my own time later on once my child's in bed. But it is a challenge to know. Doesn't mean I have to get my laptop out every night. You know, keep that balance.
Yeah, and I mean, to some of the comments that have been made, you know, it is cultural, and I'm even more conscious of it now, leading the people area, and I'm conscious of trying to set a good example, which I know I don't often. But, you know, just little things like not sending emails to people on the weekend. So, you know, it's one of the things that I'm trying to avoid doing. And technology helps, because even if I choose to do some stuff on the weekend, there are ways of delaying sending the email, so people don't feel the pressure then to have to respond, or I'm not setting an example of this is what you need to do on the weekend. It's not easy though. Yeah.
Right, well, we're rapidly running out of time, so we'll just call an end to the questions there. So a big thank you to the panel for your time and for just being so open and sharing your insights with us today. Hopefully they've given you some food for thought, and how can you balance for better. So whether it's striking a better work-life balance, identifying opportunities to lead in a different way, or taking a fresh, inclusive approach to your recruitment, we've all got a part to play in bettering our balance. So what will you do, or who will you help? So we all know that change happens by being part of the conversation. So we'll be continuing this discussion on Yammer. So please jump in and share any more thoughts and comments and questions you've got. And remember to tell your colleagues about today. As you can see, it's all being filmed, and the video will be posted up on Yammer on Friday for International Women's Day. So please encourage people to take the time to watch the video and help us balance for better. Also, please keep an eye out for the newly established women's group and see what they're up to. So they've got a target for 2019 to set up a mentoring program for New Zealand Post. It's still in the very early development stages, but look out for any further updates on Yammer and the source. And if it's something that gets you excited, please get ready to get involved. And finally, just a big thank you to everyone that was part of organising the session today. You can recognise them because they're in purple. So Claire Ben, Michelle Smith, Fiona Hole, who couldn't be here, and John from the design team who made this room look so beautifully purple. So thank you all very much.